A tea Christmas dinner. My wealthy grandpa gave each of us a check. My parents chuckled. I teased, only for show. A fake check again. I smiled, slipped mine into my pocket. Next morning, the bank called. Only one check cleared. Grandpa said, "Good. Now I know who's real." What if the biggest joke your family ever played was actually on them? That's what happened when my grandpa, quiet and tired, slid 3 plain white envelopes across the Christmas dinner table. My parents laughed, scoffed even. They thought it was a prank. They had no idea they were sealing their own fate, and mine. I still remember my mom, Denise, rolling her eyes, her smile tight and fake. "Oh, Dad," she'd said, like he was a cute, senile old man. "Are we doing the pretend check thing again? So cute." My dad, Charles, just chuckled, swirling the expensive wine in his glass. "The man loves his jokes. Just play along, Sam." But I didn't laugh. Not a single sound. I just looked at my grandpa. He seemed exhausted. And I just said, "Thank you, Grandpa." I tucked that plain white envelope into my coat pocket. My parents went right back to talking about their new car, oblivious, already forgetting his little joke. They honestly thought it was just another harmless game from an old man. They had no idea what was actually inside. And to be honest, I didn't either. Not really. But the very next morning, something pulled me to the bank. I felt strange, like I was doing something wrong, something I shouldn't be doing. I handed the check to the teller. She was quiet, for a long, long time. Then she looked up, her face completely professional, completely clear. "Your deposit cleared, Ms. Reed." And just like that, with those 5 chilling words, it wasn't a joke anymore. "My name is Samantha Reed. I'm 30 years old, and I need to tell you about my family. About my parents, Charles and Denise Reed. Because to truly understand what happened with that check, you have to understand them. You have to understand the house I grew up in. My parents cared about one thing more than anything else: looking perfect. Their entire lives were a performance. It was all about image. We lived in this huge, beautiful house, in a neighborhood where every single house was big and beautiful. Lawns were always immaculate. Cars were always brand new. My mother, Denise, actually picked our house because it had this grand, winding staircase. "Impressive," she declared. Perfect for first impressions. The inside of that house, just as impressive and just as cold. We had a living room no one was ever allowed to live in. The carpet was white. The sofas were white. They were covered in some expensive, scratchy fabric that was utterly uncomfortable. My mother had chosen them straight from a magazine. "Isn't it elegant, Samantha?" she'd ask, her eyes begging for affirmation. I'd just nod. I remember, once I was 8 years old. I spilled a tiny drop of water on that pristine white sofa. The way my mother screamed, you would have thought I'd set the house on fire. She scrubbed that spot for an hour, her face tight and angry. "This is why we can't have nice things," she whispered, but she wasn't looking at the sofa. She was looking right at me. After that, I never, ever went into that room alone again. My entire childhood felt like one endless photo shoot. My mother was obsessed with our family photos. Every Christmas, every Easter, every vacation. We had to pose. We had to look happy. We had to look perfect. I remember one Christmas, I was 12. My mom had bought us all matching red sweaters. They were so itchy. I was frowning. "Samantha, smile," my dad, Charles, snapped. He was by the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, already practicing his own perfectly relaxed smile. "It's itchy," I whined. "Stop it," my mother hissed, her voice low and sharp. She grabbed my shoulders, practically twisting me towards the camera. "Your father and I work hard to give you this life. The least you can do is look grateful for one picture. Now smile." So I did. A fake, tight smile. My eyes, I remember, looked utterly sad. But my mother loved that picture. "We look like a magazine," she'd gush. She framed it, put it right on the grand piano. The hard work. That was their favorite phrase. "We've worked so hard for this life," they'd announce at parties. And my parents adored parties. They loved filling their perfect house with other perfectly polished people. The house would echo with loud, fake laughter, reeking of expensive wine and perfume. My job at these events was to be the perfect, quiet daughter. I'd wear the dress my mother picked out, smiled politely at the adults, offered to take their coats. Then, the moment no one was looking, I'd escape to my room and just read. One time, a woman I didn't even know followed me upstairs. She was looking for the bathroom. She found me sitting on my bed, lost in a book. She gave me this small, almost embarrassed smile. I just nodded. She looked around my room. It was the only space in that entire house that actually looked lived in. I had posters on the wall, a messy desk piled with my sketches. "Your parents are a lot," she said, and then she laughed, a little sheepishly. "I'm Mrs. Gable." Later, I heard my mother talking to her by the stairs. "Oh, Samantha is just so shy," my mom trilled, her voice hitting that high, bright party tone. "She's in her awkward phase. We're hoping she grows out of it." I wasn't shy. I just didn't like their friends. I didn't like the suffocating noise. And I absolutely hated the fakeness of it all. The truth is, all that talk about hard work, it was a complete lie. The perfect house, the new cars, the parties, even those suffocating white sofas, it all came from one single source, my grandfather, Walter Reed. Grandpa Walter was absolutely nothing like my parents. He was truly self-made. He started his construction company with literally one truck and 2 ladders. He built it, brick by brick, into one of the biggest, most respected firms in the entire state. He was old-school wealthy, you know. The kind of man who still polished his own shoes and read the newspaper, leaving ink smudges on his fingers. My dad worked at the company. His title was Vice President of Development. But one summer, when I helped Grandpa with his office paperwork, I saw the numbers. My dad's development mostly involved playing golf and taking clients to obscenely expensive lunches. Grandpa's company paid for my parents' house, for their cars, for those ridiculous white carpets. My parents loved Grandpa's money, but they were deeply, profoundly embarrassed by him. He was too real, too blunt. He wore old-fashioned suits. He drank cheap, black coffee. I remember this one party. A man was talking to my father about stocks, all fancy and intellectual. Grandpa walked up. "You don't invest in stocks, Walter." The man chuckled, a condescending edge to his voice. "No," Grandpa said, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the chatter. "I invest in steel and concrete, and people who show up on time. Things you can touch." The man looked utterly confused. My father's face turned bright red. He quickly changed the subject. "More wine? Anyone?" Later that night, I overheard my parents arguing in their bedroom. "He humiliated me, Denise," my father fumed, talking about steel and concrete like some common laborer. "I know. Charles, I know," my mother sighed, her voice tired. "He just doesn't understand. He's from a different time. They loved showing him off sometimes, though. He was their proof." "My father," my dad would say, throwing an arm around Grandpa for a photo op. "The one who built this city." But they never truly loved his values. They never actually listened to him. They saw him as their own personal bank. A bank that was old, a little fussy, maybe, but one that would always give them money. They never, ever thought that bank would close. To my parents, I was a failure. Their greatest disappointment. They wouldn't say it out loud, not in those exact words, of course. They were far too polite for that. Instead, they'd use other phrases. "Samantha's just finding her way. She's so creative." Or their absolute favorite, "She's wasting her potential." My parents' definition of success was painfully narrow. It meant a sprawling house in their neighborhood. It meant a real job, a doctor, a lawyer, or, a vice president of development. And it meant marrying someone who also had a real job and a big house. I had none of those things. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Portland. It was small. The floors creaked. The kitchen was tiny. My parents hated it. "It's so small," my mother gasped the first time she visited, looking at my old, comfortable sofa like it was diseased. "And the neighborhood, Samantha? Do you feel safe here?" "I love it, Mom," I told her. And I truly did. My apartment was mine. The walls were painted a warm, soft yellow. My design sketches and favorite paintings were pinned up everywhere. My bookshelves were overflowing. It was a space for living, not for showing off. It was messy. It was comfortable. It was real. My job was their other big problem. I was a freelance interior designer. A decorator. My father had scoffed when I told him. No, Dad. A designer. I helped people make their homes functional and beautiful. There's no money in paint swatches, Sam, he'd said, shaking his head. It's a hobby. You wasted a college degree on a hobby. You should have gone to law school. And I almost did. They pushed me so hard. A law degree is so respectable, my mother would purr. Think of the potential. But I was miserable. Truly, utterly miserable. One night, I was crying, trying to study for the entrance exam, when Grandpa Walter called. You sound terrible, he simply said. I'm fine, Grandpa, I lied. No, you're not. You sound like you're swallowing rocks. What is it? So I told him. I poured out my heart. I told him I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to make things. I wanted to work with color and light and space. I wanted to help people create homes. He was quiet for a long time. I thought, oh God, he's angry too. All right, he finally said. Come over on Saturday. We're old clothes. When I got to his house, he didn't take me to the living room. He led me straight to his workshop in the garage. It was this big, dusty space, smelling of sawdust and oil. He pointed to a pile of old wood in the corner. I need a table for my entryway, he said. Let's build one. We spent the entire weekend in that garage. He didn't just tell me what to do. He taught me how to measure, how to cut. He taught me about different kinds of wood, about grain, about joints. It's not about the paint, Sam, he said, running his hand over a piece of smooth, sanded oak. The paint is the easy part. It's about the bones, the foundation. If the joints are weak, the table will fall. Doesn't matter how pretty the paint is. My hands were sore. I had blisters. Sawdust was everywhere, even in my hair. I had never been happier. When we were done, we had this small, simple, truly beautiful table. And it was strong. That's real work, Sam, he said, putting a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. Honest work. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. I still have that table. It's in my tiny apartment. I put my keys on it every single day. It's the most valuable thing I own. Grandpa Walter was the only one who truly understood. He was the only one who ever asked about my work, not my salary. He'd call me up. What problem are you solving today, Sam? I'd tell him about a cramped apartment needing storage, or a new family with no money for a nursery. And what did you do? He'd ask. I'd excitedly share my ideas. I'm building a bench with storage underneath and painting the walls a color that will make the room feel bigger. Good, he'd grunt. Smart. Honest. That's my girl. He was the only one who actually saw me. My parents saw wasted potential. Grandpa saw my work. He had this saying. I heard him use it a lot, usually after he'd witnessed someone being rude, or flashy, or just plain fake. He'd watch them, his eyes sharp. Then he'd look at me and say, Money doesn't test people, Sam. Gratitude does. I didn't really grasp it back then. I just thought it was one of his wise old grandpa sayings. What do you mean, Grandpa? I asked him once at a diner. He'd just left a 50% tip for the waitress, who looked absolutely exhausted. You watch how people treat those they don't need, he'd explained, sipping his black coffee. You watch how they say thank you. You watch if they mean it. A person can have all the money in the world, but if they aren't grateful, they're poor. They're just an empty room. I nodded. I thought I understood, but I didn't. Not really. I never realized that all those years, he wasn't just teaching me. He was watching me, and he was watching my parents. He always said, Money doesn't test people. Gratitude does. I just never realized that Christmas dinner, that was the final test. The room smelled of pine and roasted duck. It was Christmas dinner, of course, at my parents' house. My mother had been planning the menu for weeks. The table was perfect. Long, dark wood, polished until it gleamed like a mirror. It was set with her absolute best china, plates edged with thin gold leaf. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight, throwing tiny rainbows on the white walls. The centerpiece was huge, a mountain of pine boughs, silver balls, and red berries. It was so big, I could barely see my dad sitting across from me. The atmosphere. Stiff. Christmas with my parents wasn't fun. It was a performance. My mother, Denise, in her red silk dress, hair perfect, smile tight. She was a bundle of nerves. Charles, do you think the duck is too dry? she whispered to my dad. It's fine, Denise. Everything is fine, he mumbled, not even looking at her. He was checking his phone under the table, probably the stock market. I just want everything to be perfect for your father, she insisted. Grandpa Walter sat at the head of the table, looking small in that huge high-back chair. He was wearing an old, dark green wool sweater. Clean, yes, but definitely old. I saw my mother's eyes flick to it. I knew she was thinking how utterly inappropriate it was for her perfect Christmas table. Me? I was just trying to be invisible. In a simple black dress, sipping my water, counting the minutes until I could escape back to my small, quiet apartment. The conversation, as usual, was all about my parents. Our trip to Aspen was just divine, my mother declared to Grandpa. We're thinking of buying a small place there. Oh, Grandpa said. He still hadn't touched his duck. You have a place here. Oh, Dad. Mom laughed, that high, fake party laugh. It's an investment. Charles is so smart about investments, aren't you, Charles? My dad puffed out his chest. The market is very strong, Walter. You have to know when to move. I watched Grandpa. He just nodded slowly, took a bite of duck, chewed. He looked so tired. After the main course, my mother cleared the plates, bringing out some elaborate dessert with chocolate and gold flakes. Then, Grandpa cleared his throat. It was a quiet sound, but in that big, silent room, it resonated like a drum. I have something for you, he said. My parents froze. They stared at him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 plain, white business-sized envelopes. He slid one to my dad, one to my mom, and one, all the way down the table, to me. A little Christmas gift for each of you, he said, his voice quiet. My parents looked at each other, and then they laughed. My mother, Denise, laughed first. That high, tinkling party laugh. Oh, Dad, she chirped, picking up the envelope but not even glancing inside. You're still playing Santa, huh? This is so cute. She fanned herself with it. What is it this year? A check for $1 million, I love yous. My dad, Charles, chuckled. He smirked. He picked up his envelope, tapped it on the table. The man loves his jokes, he said. He actually looked at me, giving me a knowing glance. Just play along, Sam. He loves it. He didn't open his either. Just set it beside his wine glass like it was a napkin. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. I looked at Grandpa. He was looking right at me. His eyes. I will never forget his eyes. They weren't twinkling. They weren't happy. They were sad. Deeply, profoundly sad. He looked utterly exhausted. He watched my mother laugh at his gift. He watched my father dismiss it. Then his eyes found mine. I picked up my envelope. Thank you, Grandpa, I said. My voice was just a whisper. He held my gaze. And just for a second, he nodded. A tiny, almost invisible nod. And before he looked away, he said something so softly that my parents couldn't possibly have heard. Keep it safe. My heart did this strange, tight little flip. Keep it safe. What did that even mean? I held the envelope in my lap. It felt heavy. It felt important. My mother had already forgotten hers, leaving it on the sideboard next to a stack of dirty dessert plates. She was already chattering about her New Year's Eve party plans. My dad had tucked his into his suit jacket pocket, probably without even thinking, like you'd pocket a business card you plan to throw away later. The joke was over. The performance continued. I slipped my envelope into my coat pocket. My hand went straight in, clutching it. I didn't understand what was happening. Not yet. But I knew, deep in my bones, that something had just broken. I sat there at that perfect, polished table, and I felt the crack. The foundation was giving way. When I left, I hugged Grandpa. Goodbye. His hug was tighter than usual. He held on for an extra second. Drive careful, Sam, he said softly, his voice muffled in my hair. I will, Grandpa. I love you. I love you too, child, he whispered back. You're a good girl. You're real. My parents waved from their perfect, brightly lit doorway. The light from their chandelier spilled out onto the perfect lawn. Merry Christmas, my mother called. Don't forget to call your aunt. They were already closing the door, already moving on. I sat in my cold car for a full minute, my hand still in my pocket, clutching that white envelope. It didn't feel like a joke at all. The drive back to my apartment in Portland was dead quiet. The streets were mostly empty, Christmas lights blurring past my windows, red, green, blue. My car's heater was broken, so I was shivering. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other buried in my coat pocket, fingers wrapped around that envelope. Keep it safe! His words just kept echoing in my head. Then my mother's laugh. So cute. My father's smirk. The man loves his jokes. I felt physically sick. A cold, heavy anger began to settle deep in my stomach. They hadn't even opened them. Hadn't even looked. They had laughed at him. Laughed at his gift, right to his face. When I finally reached my building, I practically ran up the stairs. I just needed to be inside my own space. I locked the door behind me, leaning against it, breathing hard. My apartment was messy. Yes, but it was warm. I switched on one small lamp, took off my coat, tossing it onto my worn sofa. My hands were shaking a little as I made myself a cup of tea. I sat on the floor, leaning back against the couch. The envelope lay on my coffee table. Just a plain white business envelope. My name, Samantha Reed, was written on the front in his strong, familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long, long time. Part of me was terrified to open it. What if it was a joke? What if it was a fake check for 1,000,000 hugs, and all this intense, heavy feeling was just me being stupid? But then what if it was real? I picked it up. My fingers slid, carefully under the flap. I didn't want to rip it. Slowly, I pulled out the paper inside. It was a check. A real cashier's check. From his personal bank. My eyes flew to the pay to the order of line, Samantha Reed. Then, to the little box with the numbers. My breath just stopped. $100,000. I read it again. And again. The signature at the bottom was his, Walter Reed. It was real. I sat there on my floor, in my tiny apartment, and I just stared. My chest felt tight. I thought I was supposed to be happy. Excited, even. I should have been jumping up and down, right? I'm rich. But I didn't feel any of that. I felt heavy. I felt an incredible, crushing weight. This wasn't just a gift. This was a statement. This was a test. And my parents, they had failed. He had given them the exact same envelope, the exact same chance. And they had laughed. They had tossed it aside like garbage. He knew. He knew they would. He had given me one too. And I had simply said, thank you. It wasn't a test of me. It was a test of them. He was just showing me the results. I felt a sudden, hot wave of respect for my grandfather. It was so sharp, it almost hurt. He was smarter than all of them. He was stronger. And then, a deep, cold sadness washed over me for my parents. They were so blind, so lost in their world of white carpets and potential that they couldn't see a real thing when it was right in front of them. I didn't know what to do with the check. Cashing it felt wrong. It felt like money. And this wasn't about money. It was about something else entirely. I got up and walked to my desk. There on my desk was a small, dark wooden box. It had a smooth, polished lid. It was the table we built, Grandpa and I, in his workshop. I kept my real treasures in it. I opened the lid. The smell of cedar and old paper filled the air. Inside there wasn't much. The photo of me and him, covered in sawdust, grinning at the camera. A letter my best friend Zoe wrote me when I moved to Portland. A letter that simply said, "You are brave." A tiny, pressed flower from the first bouquet a client ever gave me. Things that mattered. I took the check, folded it once, placed it inside the box, right on top of the photo. I closed the lid. It felt right. It was safe. It was where it belonged. It was a symbol of respect. It was proof that he saw me. I didn't sleep a wink that night. What should I do? My mind just raced. The next morning, I woke up feeling utterly hungover, even without drinking. I made coffee and just stared at that wooden box. $100,000. That was a life-changing amount of money. It would pay off my student loans. It would let me rent a real design studio. It would give me security. But then a new thought crept in. A small, ugly thought. What if my parents were right? What if it was a game? What if this was the real test? What if he was waiting to see what I would do? If I cashed it immediately, would that make me greedy just like them? But if I didn't cash it, would I be disrespecting his gift? Would I be a fool? I was so confused. It felt like one of those stories with a riddle you absolutely had to solve. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about knowing if this was real. Was this entire crazy thing actually happening, or was I just imagining it? I told myself I wasn't cashing it. I was just checking. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely log in. I took the check out of the box. I felt this pang, like I was doing something wrong, like I was betraying it. I laid it flat on the table. Mobile deposit. I snapped a picture of the front. My hand trembled. The picture was blurry. I took it again. Then a picture of the back. For mobile deposit only. The app spun for a moment. Deposit submitted for $100,000. I felt instantly sick. I shoved the check back into the wooden box. Closed the lid. I felt small. I felt like I had taken this beautiful, heavy symbol of respect and tried to cheapen it into just money. I felt like my parents. The next few hours were pure torture. I sat on my sofa, just staring at my phone. I tried to work, but I couldn't focus. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I was waiting for the deposit failed email. Waiting for the insufficient funds notice. Waiting for a just kidding text from Grandpa. I needed a sign. I needed to know what was real. Those words, deposit submitted, just hung there on my phone screen. I finally put the phone down, face down on my coffee table. I felt dirty. Cheap. What had I done? I had taken his gift, his test, and treated it like a lottery ticket. I went to the kitchen and scrubbed my hands, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I paced my apartment for the next hour. It'll be rejected, I told myself. The bank will send a deposit failed email. Then I'll know. I'll know it was all a game, and I'll put the check back in the box, and I'll never look at it again. That'll be the end of it. I was almost hoping it would fail. My phone remained silent. The silence was deafening. After another hour, I just couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the phone. My banking app was still open. I refreshed the page. My heart stopped. No, it didn't just stop. It felt like it was grabbed and squeezed. The pending status was gone. The check was listed under completed transactions. And my account balance, the number at the top of the screen, it had changed. I was looking at a number with 5 zeros at the end. It was real. The deposit hadn't failed. It hadn't been stopped. It wasn't a joke. It was real. Your deposit has cleared. The teller's words from yesterday flashed in my head. But now, the app was right there in front of my face. It was just a number on a screen, but it felt like a mountain had just landed in my living room. My hands shook so hard I dropped the phone onto the couch. It was real. I sat down, buried my head in my hands. I wasn't happy. I was terrified, because if my check was real, it meant their checks were real too. And they had laughed. They had left them on the table. Oh God, I didn't know what to do. Should I call them? Mom, Dad, that check you laughed at? It was real. Should I call Grandpa? Grandpa, why did you do this? I did nothing. I just sat there, frozen. The number on my phone screen felt like it was burning a hole in my apartment. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up, Mom. My blood turned to ice. This was it. The other shoe had dropped. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I wiped my sweaty hand on my jeans before finally picking it up. Hello! My voice was a tiny whisper. Samantha, why didn't you pick up? Her voice was high and tight, not my mom's voice. Sharp, edgy. I was in the bathroom, Mom. I'll tell you what's up. I just had the most mortifying experience of my life. I stayed quiet. Your father and I were just, cleaning up from Christmas. And I found that envelope your grandfather gave me. The one he gave your father, too. We were laughing about it. Her voice trembled, trying to sound casual, but she was failing spectacularly. We thought, oh, what the heck? Let's see what the joke is. So I called the bank, just to ask. And the manager said the checks were stopped. He said your grandfather had put a stop payment on them yesterday morning. She was talking so fast, breathless. He humiliated us, Samantha. He let us, how could he? I still said nothing. I had no idea what to say. Did you talk to your grandfather today? She demanded, her voice suddenly cold and suspicious. No, why? Don't lie to me, Samantha. I'm not lying, Mom. A long, cold silence. I could hear her ragged breathing. The bank manager, she continued, her voice now dangerously low, said that one check did go through. A large one. This morning. A chilling pause. Ours were stopped, but yours went through. I couldn't speak. My throat was utterly closed. He's playing favorites again, she shrieked. The sudden volume made me flinch. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years. It was the sound from my childhood. The sound of the spilled water on the white sofa. It was raw, ugly jealousy. After everything we do for him. We host him. We take care of him. We manage his life. And you show up twice a year, and he gives you. What did he give you, Samantha? Mom, she demanded. I couldn't tell her. I wouldn't. This is ridiculous, she snapped. I'm putting your father on. I heard fumbling. My dad's angry, muffled voice. Just give me the phone, Denise. Samantha, he barked. Hi, Dad. Don't hide at me. Your mother is hysterical. You should have told us. Told you what? I whispered. That you knew. That you knew the check was real. You went behind our backs. You cashed it, didn't you? You scurried off to the bank first thing in the morning like a little thief. I didn't. He's old, Sam. My father's voice suddenly changed. He was trying to sound reasonable now. Paternal, that voice he used when he was trying to handle a problem. He's old, and he's not thinking clearly. He doesn't know what he's doing. I thought of Grandpa's eyes. Clear. Sad. Steady. He's playing games, and you fell for it. And you've created a huge problem for this family. I didn't create anything, I said, my voice suddenly clear and cold. Listen to me, Samantha. That money is not yours. It's family money. Your grandfather is confused. You need to come here, and we are going to sort this out. We will put the money into a joint account. We will manage it for you. It's the only fair thing to do. You don't understand finances. You just waste money on your hobby. It's not a hobby. I yelled. This is not up for debate, he shouted back. You have put this family in a terrible position. You should have told us. You laughed at it. I said, the words finally, pouring out. You didn't even open it. You called it a joke. A long, terrible silence stretched between us. I had spoken the truth. The one thing they couldn't argue with. My father's voice, when it came back, was flat and cold. Colder than I had ever heard it. He's an old, senile man, Samantha. And you are a very foolish girl. He hung up. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear. The dial tone buzzed. He's old. He doesn't know what he's doing. I looked at the number in my bank account. I looked at the wooden box on my desk, the one I had built with him. Money doesn't test people. Gratitude does. My parents were wrong. I knew, with a sudden, terrible clarity, that my grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I was a ghost in my own apartment. I didn't answer my phone. Didn't check my email. My parents called again, and again and again. Their names would flash on the screen, Mom, or Dad, and I'd just watch, my stomach twisting into knots, until it went to voicemail. They left messages. My mother's were first. Tearful, pleading. Samantha, darling, please call me. We're just worried about you. Your father was upset. He didn't mean it. We just want to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. My father's were different. Short. Angry. Samantha, stop this childish behavior. Call me now. Then the text started. We know you're there. This is irresponsible. You are tearing this family apart. Me. I was tearing the family apart. Not their greed. Not their laughter. Me. I finally turned my phone off. The silence was better, but also worse. That $100,000 just sat there in my checking account. It felt like a bomb. I was terrified to touch it. Terrified to even look at it. I bought groceries with my credit card. I didn't want to use that money. It didn't feel like my money. It felt like evidence. I couldn't work. I sat at my design table and stared at a blank page. I tried to sketch, but my hands were still shaking. The colors all looked wrong. Everything looked gray. I was alone. I was rich, I guess. And I had never felt more alone in my life. On the second day, I just couldn't take it anymore. I turned my phone on. Ignored the dozen new messages from my parents. and I called the only person I could. Sam! Oh my God, are you alive? Zoe screeched. I was about to call the police. Zoe Harper. My best friend since college. She was the complete opposite of me. Loud, funny, absolutely fearless. And she was a lawyer. A real one, as my father would say. She worked for legal aid, helping people who had no money. My parents, naturally, hated her. Said she was aggressive and a bad influence. I'm not okay, Zoe, I whispered, feeling the tears start. I hadn't cried yet. Where are you? I'm coming over. No. I need to get out of here. Can I meet you? We met at our favorite diner. It was old, smelling of coffee and bacon. I sat in a booth in the back, my hands wrapped around a hot mug of tea. Zoe slid in across from me, her sharp, dark eyes scanning my face. Okay, she said, all business. You look like hell. Start from the top. What did they do? So I told her. Everything. The dinner. The laughter. The pretend check. My parents' disgust. Grandpa's sad eyes. His words. Keep it safe. Zoe just listened, her face getting tighter and tighter. Then I told her about the next morning. The deposit. The number. Zoe's eyes went wide. $100,000, Sam. Sure. I hissed, looking around. Holy, she whispered. Then I told her about the phone calls. My mother's mortifying experience. The stop checks. My father's, you're a foolish girl. When I was done, I was crying. Just quiet, tired tears rolling down my face. Zoe was silent, staring into her coffee cup. Zoe. She looked up. Her face wasn't sad. It was furious. Zoe, don't. I'm going to kill them, she said, her voice a low growl. I am. I'm a lawyer. I can find a way to make it legal. They said I was tearing this family apart. They are not a family, Sam, she countered sharply. They're a corporation. And you just messed with their bottom line. It's not funny, Zoe. I'm not laughing, she snapped. I am furious. They've been treating you like this your entire life. Like you're the broken, weird one, just because you're decent. And now your grandpa finally calls them on it. He finally shows you what you're worth, and they call you a thief for being grateful. I don't know what to do, I whispered. I'm so scared. Scared of what? Them, Sam? They can't do anything. It's your name on the check. It's in your account. It's your money. Game over. It's not about the money, I said, a little too loud. It's him. It's Grandpa. What did I just do? Did I get him in trouble? Is he okay? What if my dad is right? What if he's not right? Zoe's face softened. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was warm and strong. Sam, look at me. Your grandfather is a genius. He is the smartest one in this whole mess. He's not old and confused. He's strategic. He knew exactly what they would do. He's been watching them. He's been watching you. This wasn't a gift of money, Sam. It was a gift of truth. I took a shaky breath. So what do I do now? Nothing, she said. You live your life. You pay off your loans. You rent that studio you've been dreaming about. You use it. That's the best thank you can give him. And you block your parents' numbers. I can't do that. Okay, fine, she sighed. Baby steps. Just wait. Wait for the next move. I drove home feeling not necessarily better, but definitely stronger. Zoe had put some steel in my spine. He's a genius. It was a gift of truth. I got to my apartment, checked my mailbox, and there it was. Not a business envelope this time. This one was thick, heavy, cream-colored cardstock. My name, Samantha, was written on the front in my grandfather's distinct handwriting, that strong, clear, old-fashioned script. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. I went upstairs, my keys shaking in my hand. Sat on my sofa. I opened it. There was no letter. No explanation. Just a single card, as thick as the envelope itself. It was printed, not handwritten. Dinner. Saturday, 7 p.m. And underneath, the address of his house. Not my parents' house. His house. That was it. My blood ran cold. This was the next move. This was the showdown. I called Zoe. He invited me to dinner. I managed. Saturday. Okay, she said, her voice cautious. Just you. I think so. It just has the time and place. So what? Zoe's voice took on that lawyer-like edge. You think he's about to confront them? Is he going to have them there? Is this an ambush? I looked at the simple, elegant card. Dinner. Saturday. 7 p.m. I thought about the stop checks. The $100,000 sitting in my bank account. The decades of watching and listening and testing. A calm, cold, sad feeling settled over me. No, Zoe, I said quietly, staring at the card. I don't think he's about to confront them. Then what? I think he already did. I think the test is over. This is him announcing the results. The drive to my grandfather's house that Saturday night was the loneliest drive of my life. My little car felt so small on those wide, dark roads leading to his neighborhood. My parents lived in this new, flashy development. Grandpa, he lived in the old original wealthy part of town. His house wasn't some modern white and glass box. It was a solid, 300-year-old brick house. Timeless, real. It was set back from the road, hidden by ancient, huge oak trees. I parked my car behind a row of other, much more expensive vehicles. And then I saw it, my parents' silver Mercedes. My stomach dropped. They were here. This wasn't just announcing the results. This was an execution. And I had no idea if I was the guest of honor or the main course. I walked to the front door, my heart hammering in my ears. I thought about turning around. Thought about getting back in my car, driving back to Portland, and never speaking to any of them ever again. But then I thought of Grandpa. His sad eyes. Keep it safe. I had to see this through. I rang the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately. It wasn't Grandpa. It was his housekeeper, Maria. She'd worked for him forever. She smiled at me, a warm, genuine smile. Samantha, he is waiting for you in the study. Are my parents here? I whispered. Maria's smile faded. They are in the dining room, she said, and her tone told me everything. She led me down the hall. My parents' house was all harsh white walls and bright, blinding lights. Grandpa's house was warm. The walls lined with books. The floors dark wood, covered in beautiful, old rugs. It smelled like old books and wood polish and the faint, sweet scent of his pipe tobacco. It smelled like home. Maria opened the doors to the study. Grandpa Walter was sitting behind his huge, dark desk. He wasn't working. He was just sitting there, his hands folded, waiting for me. Hello, Samantha, he said, his voice completely calm. Grandpa, I managed. I wanted to run to him, to cry, to ask him a million questions. But I just stood there. You look nervous, he observed. I am. Don't be, he said. You've done nothing wrong. Sit down. I sank into the big, leather chair across from his desk. He looked at me, his eyes clear and sharp. You got my invitation? I nodded. They're here, aren't they? Yes, he said. They are. Now, before we go in there, I want you to know something. What happens in that room tonight has nothing to do with you. It is not your fault. It is not your problem. This is between me and them. It has been for 30 years. Your only job tonight is to be quiet and to be real. Can you do that? Be real. Just be yourself, Sam. That's all you've ever been. It's all I've ever asked. He stood up. He was an old man, but he stood up straight. He looked powerful. He was wearing a dark suit, not his usual old sweater. Let's go to dinner, he said. He put his hand on my back, a firm, reassuring touch, and we walked out of the study. We walked down the hall to the dining room. I felt like I was walking into a bad dream. My parents were standing by the fireplace. They weren't talking. My mother, Denise, in a black dress that was far too expensive, her smile stiff, stretched so tight I thought her face might crack. Her eyes were red. My father, Charles, stood with his hands in his pockets, staring into the unlit fireplace, his face tight with anger, a dark, blotchy red. They both turned as we walked in. My mother's eyes flew to me, her wobbly smile. Samantha, you came. She looked at Grandpa. Dad, this is the surprise? Is it? Grandpa said, his voice utterly calm. He walked to the head of the table. Please sit. My parents sat on one side. I sat on the other. Alone. Grandpa stayed standing at the head of the table. He wasn't carrying a platter of food. He was carrying a thin folder. A legal folder made of beige cardstock. He set it on the table in front of him. The sound was soft, but it echoed in the terrifying silence. "You'll each find your name on these papers," he said. He didn't look at the folder. He looked at my parents. My mother's voice cracked. She burst into tears. But they weren't sad tears. They were angry, frustrated tears. "You humiliated us, Dad," she cried, her voice rising. "You stopped our checks. You made us look like fools after all we've done for you." "What have you done for me, Denise?" Grandpa asked. His voice was still quiet, still calm, but it cut through her sobs like a knife. She stopped. I did stop the checks," Grandpa said, nodding calmly. "I did." He looked at my mother. He looked at my father. "For 30 years, I have given you everything. A house, cars, a job you don't do, an allowance for a woman your age. I have given, and you have taken, and you have not once, said thank you and meant it." "That's not true," my father found his voice. "At Christmas," Grandpa continued, as if my father hadn't spoken, "I gave you a final gift. A simple test. I gave you the same thing I gave Samantha." My parents both looked at me. My mother's look was pure poison. "I gave you a check. A real one. A gift. And you laughed. You laughed at me. You threw it on the sideboard with the garbage. You rolled your eyes, Denise. You smirked, Charles. You called me a joke." His voice was so calm. That's what made it so terrifying. He wasn't yelling. He was just stating facts. "You laughed at a gift, so you laughed at me." "It was a test," my father shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The crystal glasses rattled. A sick, twisted old man's game. "Life is a test, Charles," Grandpa said. "You failed." "And her," my father yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. A vein pulsed purple in his forehead. "You rewarded her for what? For doing nothing. For being a failure. For wasting her potential. She's done nothing." The room was silent. I could feel all their eyes on me. I felt so small. Like I was 12 years old again, in that itchy red sweater. I looked at my grandfather. He was still looking at my dad. "She did everything," Grandpa said, his voice so quiet, so full of power I almost cried. "She did everything." He repeated. "She listened. When I spoke, she listened. When I taught her, she learned. She works. She builds. She respects herself," she said. "Thank you for a gift she didn't even know was real." He turned his clear, steady eyes on me. She didn't laugh. The silence that followed was sacred. That's the only word for it. It was the sound of a 30-year-long lie finally dying. It was the sound of truth filling a room. My father's face was white. My mother was completely, utterly silent, her mouth agape. They had nothing left to say. He had taken all their words away. My grandfather, Walter Reed, did not move. He stood at the head of his table, a king in his own home. My father's fist was still on the table. My mother's face was pale and blotchy. Grandpa picked up the thin beige folder. He opened it. He slid it across the polished wood table. It stopped right in front of me. "This is yours, Samantha," he said. I looked down. My hands were in my lap. I was afraid to touch it. My father leaned forward, squinting. "What is that? What is this?" "More games." I put my hands on the folder. Opened it. It was not a check. It was paper after paper of legal documents. My eyes just scanned the words. I didn't understand all of them. But I saw a last will and testament of Walter Reed. Durable power of attorney. Transfer of deed. Articles of incorporation for Reed Construction. And on every single page, in the places for executor, or beneficiary, or trustee, I saw my name, Samantha Reed. My breath left my body. This wasn't the $100,000. This was everything. This was the company, the house, the trust. "What is that?" my mother whispered. She was pale. She looked sick. "What is that, Samantha?" she asked again, her voice rising in panic. I couldn't speak. I just looked. At my grandfather. "It's my estate, Denise," Grandpa said calmly. "It's my legacy." You can't do that," my mother stammered. "You can't. Charles is your son. He's the vice president. It's his." "Charles has a title," Grandpa stated. "He does not have the job. He has never done the job. He has a salary which I have paid. You can't do this, my father roared. He stood up, his chair scraping violently on the wood floor. I'm your son. She's a child. She doesn't know anything. She knows how to work, Grandpa said. She knows how to listen. She knows how to build. This is illegal, my father yelled. You're old. You're senile. She tricked you. She manipulated you. He was looking around the room, desperate, like he was looking for someone to agree with him. You're not well, Dad. You're sick. You need help. We're going to get you help. My mother caught on immediately. Yes, Dad. You're not thinking clearly. This test, it's not normal. We're worried about you. They were trying to take his power, to call him crazy. I watched, horrified, as they tried to turn this entire situation back on him. Grandpa just watched them. He let them talk. Let my father rant. Let my mother cry her fake, worried tears. He let the silence stretch out after they were done. After they had said all the ugly, desperate things. My father was breathing hard, his suit jacket bunched up. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, her face a mask of concern. Grandpa waited. Then he spoke, and his voice was not the voice of a senile old man. It was the voice of a man who built a company from a single truck. It was steel. I am not sick, Charles. I am not confused, Denise. I have never seen more clearly in my entire life. He looked at my father. He looked at my mother. I already have, he said. My mother looked confused. Have what? You said I can't do this, Grandpa reminded her. I'm telling you I already have. The papers are signed. They're filed. My lawyer, Mr. Miller, has the originals. These are your copies. It is done. My father's face had just collapsed. The anger, the bluster, it just died. He looked old, weak, like an empty room. He sank back into his chair. My father started to speak. He opened his mouth. A little sound came out. A guttural, strangled, but Grandpa's voice cut through the air. It was not loud. It was final. He looked at his son. He looked at his daughter-in-law. Now I know who's real. That was it. That sentence. Just 5 words. But it was the end. It ended everything false in that room. It ended 30 years of lies. It ended the perfect image. It ended the hard work. It ended them. My mother stood up. Her movements were stiff, almost robotic. She picked up her purse. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Grandpa. She just walked to the door. My father sat there for another second. He looked at the folder in front of me. He looked at his father. His eyes were full of something I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was hate. A deep, cold, empty hate. Then he stood up, straightened his suit jacket, and followed his wife out of the room. We just sat there. We heard the front door open. We heard it slam shut. The sound echoed through that big, quiet, solid house. And then there was peace. We sat in the silence. I was still staring at the open folder. Executor. Trustee. Samantha Reed. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I was rich. I was in charge of everything. I looked at my grandfather. He was still standing. He looked tired. He looked old. But he looked free. He let out a long, long breath. It sounded like it had been held in for 30 years. Well, he said, his voice soft now. I suppose Maria has kept dinner warm. He sat down, picked up the small bell by his plate and rang it. I just stared at him. Grandpa, I whispered, my voice broken. I can't. Can't what? He asked gently. I don't know how to do this. The company, the trust. I'm a designer. I paint walls. I don't know how to run a construction company. Maria came in, pushing a cart. She didn't even look surprised that my parents were gone. She just started setting out plates. Roasted chicken, vegetables, warm bread. Grandpa looked at me. He smiled. A real, warm smile. I taught you how to build a table, didn't I? He reminded me. Yes, but you started with a pile of wood. You measured. You cut. You learned the joints. You learned the bones. It's the same thing, Sam. Just a bigger table. He put a piece of chicken on my plate. We'll hire people to do the parts you don't know. You just be the boss. You just be real. You'll be fine. You're the only one I trust to be. We ate dinner, just the 2 of us, at that long, polished table. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about my parents. We didn't talk about the folder, which I had closed and placed on the chair next to me. He asked me about my work. Tell me about that project you were working on, he said. The one for the new family, and the small apartment, the nursery. That's the one. And so I told him. I told him how I had built a crib with storage drawers underneath. I told him about the color I'd found, a soft yellow that made the tiny room feel sunny and big. He listened. He nodded. Smart, he said. Good bones. We talked about spring planting. He wanted to plant new rose bushes along the front walk. I told him which colors I thought would look best. We talked like we always had. After dinner, we had coffee in the study. Before I left, he walked me to the door. I'm scared, Grandpa, I said, my voice quiet, vulnerable. I know, he said. He put his heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. That's why I know you're the right one. The ones who aren't scared, they're the problem. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small, folded piece of paper. Not a check, just a note. Read this later, he said. He hugged me tight. Drive safe, Sam. I drove home. I felt numb, like I was floating. I got to my apartment, sat on my sofa, opened the note. His handwriting. Money changes hands every day. Respect only once. I cried. I finally, completely, broke down and cried. Not for my parents. Not for the money. I cried for him. For his long, lonely life, watching his own family turn into fakes. I cried because he saw me. He truly saw me. A week later, I sat in a big, polished office. The sign on the door read, Miller, Grant and Associates. Grant Miller was a kind man, with glasses and a gentle smile. He looked a little like my grandfather. Your grandfather is a very, very smart man, Samantha, he said, as I signed my name page after page. He's put a lot of trust in you. I know, I said. My hand was steady. The numbers didn't matter anymore. The money was just money. It was a tool. It was a result. The lesson mattered. I'm still a designer. I have a studio now, a really nice one. I hire other young designers, and I pay them well. And, yes, I'm also the boss of Reed Construction. I sit at a big table in a boardroom. I listen. I learn. I make decisions. It's just a bigger table. I never heard from my parents. Not directly, anyway. Their lawyers sent letters, of course. They tried to contest the will. Said Grandpa was senile and under undue influence. But Grandpa was smart. He had been documenting his clear mind for years. He had letters from doctors. He had videos. The case was thrown out. They lost. They lost everything. Because they had already lost. They thought the check was fake. But the only fake thing in that house that Christmas night was their love. I still drive past that first bank sometimes. The one where I made the mobile deposit. I remember the feeling, the shaking hands, the dread. And I remember the call that changed everything. It wasn't the call from the bank telling me the money was real. It was the call from my father, telling me I was a foolish girl. That was the moment. The moment I knew he was wrong. The moment I knew my grandfather was right. The moment I finally understood what I was worth. And that decency, quiet and simple and real, was finally worth more than any dollar amount. This whole experience really redefined what family, loyalty, and true generosity meant to me. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where you realized someone's true intentions, for better or worse, in a totally unexpected way? I'd really love to hear your stories in the comments below.